I thought we would start by just going over the various pickleball rating systems, starting with, I sort of call it the legacy US APA rating, the UTPR, which is very popular. The things that you point out, which is very interesting, about the factors that go into it. UTPR has, I believe, a singles, doubles, and mixed, right?
Correct.
And Duper just has singles and doubles?
That's my understanding. Well, the current UTPR and the proposed revised UTPR both are gendered systems, separate male and separate female systems. UTR and Duper are quote unquote universal systems, meaning there's no separation based on age or gender. The current UTPR does not take into account score. So if you lose 11-0, 11-0, it's exactly the same as if you lose 11-9, 9-11, 11-9.
Tournament ratings versus club ratings versus like pro ratings.
The number one thing that really got to me, I'd have people come up to me and literally I'd sometimes in tears saying how their club play had been ruined by the rating system. Every club has their, what I call kind of their rating Nazi.
Nothing for you.
Who, oh, Susie moved down to 3.9. She has to be kicked out of the 3.5 league.
Good point. Whether self ratings should be used in a results for a match, right?
Well, one of the bigger complaints that you see, say, on Pickleball Forum about rating system is sandbagging.
Yeah.
And sandbagging is certainly something that I've heard a lot about from a lot of people.
I found more people I think rate themselves too high for their first tournament than too low.
Certainly.
I think both ways could happen.
I've had friends that did it where I remember well one friend playing his first tournament. He said, "What do you think I should play, 4-5?" And I said, "Don't take this personally, but I said, I think you should play 3-5." He's like, "What?" He said, "I play with you guys. I'm fine." And I said, Tournaments are different.
Ratings and sandbagging, that whole topic is why rating systems get a bad rep. Duper is in bed now with PPA and PT.com and pickleballtournaments.com, pickleball brackets. It looks like that is where that whole group, I don't know what APP is planning. I guess they're just supporting UTPR, right? But
well, APP is associated with USAP. USAP, I think, is dithering about which way they're going to go. I'm very concerned that USAP will just, they've got kind of a habit of going the path of least resistance. And I'm concerned that they'll just adopt Duper, saying, oh, that's the easiest thing to do, rather than using the revised UTPR, which cures the very, very serious faults that Duper extremely has. Wrong. There are people who if you can sandbag a system, they are absolutely going to do it. Absolutely going to do it. Right. And even if it happens once, that's one too many times. If you have somebody win a 4-0 gold medal at nationals that doesn't belong in 4-0 and did it through gaming the system, that's one time too many. The second issue is this whole issue about a universal rating versus a gendered rating.
Welcome to Pickleball is Life. If you like these videos, all I ask is that you please press the red subscribe button on the bottom right. It won't cost you anything. And if you want to support my channel, here's my Pickleball is Life clothing line with fleece jackets, quarter zips, racerbacks, t-shirts, shorts, hats, visors, and sport towels. Purchase them online at my Pickleball is Life Facebook shop or Etsy store.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me, Jim. Can you give us, our viewers, a little background? This is Jim Kloss, on your involvement with pickleball and pickleball ratings.
Sure, good to be here, Nick. As far as pickleball goes, I was a longtime tennis player and discovered it by lucky happenstance it's been about 8-9 years ago now. And after I started to get involved with pickleball and the first tournaments I played, rating systems were of interest to me, especially in part because of my tennis background. So, USAP is sort of been based in Arizona for a while. Past presidents like Jack Thomas and so on were out here. So I had the opportunity through pickleball early on to get to know a lot of the USAP officers and board members, and talked a lot to them about their rating system and so on, because it was, again, kind of a particular interest to me with my background from tennis.
Cool. I thought we would start by just going over the various pickleball rating systems, starting with, I sort of call it the legacy US APA rating, the UTPR, which is very popular, the WPR, the new pickleball brackets rating, and Duper, of course, and now even Universal Tennis seems to be wanting to get into the rating systems.
Yeah.
So let's start with how ratings started. Is that the right term? Is that the term, the legacy? Is I don't know whether it's the legacy UTPR or legacy USAP rating.
Yeah. I mean, USAP started with ratings a few years before I got involved with it, but I do have an understanding. The national tournament, for example, goes back, I would say, to around Nationals must be in about its 13th, 14th year, something like that. So obviously they needed brackets for nationals or brackets for other tournaments. And my understanding is they just copied what was there from tennis, USTA, with the numbers that we're all used to, 3.0, 3.5, 4.0, etc. And what USAP started with was what we all have come to call a legacy rating. It wasn't originally called that, but what they did was you could just basically on your own, if you started in your first tournament, pick your rating. I feel like I'm a 3.5. I feel like I'm a 4.0. You sign up for the tournament at that level, play at that level, get kind of a feel for how you're doing. And as far as moving up and moving down, that was just controlled through the tournament directors communicating with USAP. So, for example, I play a tournament or two at 3.5. A tournament director sees me playing and goes, whoa, wait a minute, Jim's whipping everybody at 3.5. He needs to move up to 4.0. And they would just, after a tournament directors had the option of sending in a recommendation to USAP saying, here are people I think should move up.
USAP was managing the ratings themselves without pickleballtournaments.com data?
Correct. It was just done through USAP had a ratings person, and they would just get recommendations from tournament directors or from players themselves. And it could also be moving down. Maybe I start out at 4.0 and I get my butt kicked a bunch of times. Maybe I have a knee injury. I'm coming back from an ACL or something, and I'm just not the same. You could apply for things like an injury designation, and you could move down as well. But it was just kind of an ad hoc system.
Got it. And when did was the pickleballtournaments.com data the first sort of calculated rating?
Well, what developed over time was a feeling that the legacy rating system was not responsive enough. I'd be playing in a tournament in Arizona, and that tournament director just doesn't really pay attention, doesn't send in data, doesn't change anything. You're playing in some tournaments where you are, and maybe you've got a tournament director that's watching every match and really thinking about what rating. So it's very, like I said, very ad hoc. There were times where a certain doubles team might just dominate their event, say women's doubles 50 plus 3.5. You'd have a team winning 5 tournaments in a row, gold medals, never moving up. And people would be like, why aren't they moving up? Why aren't they moving up? They're winning every time. Well, it was just because they happen to play tournaments where tournament directors, for whatever reason, they've got a lot on their plate. Maybe they don't take the time after the tournament to really think about who should move up. And so somebody could stay at a level and kind of dominate for a while.
So what happened? What was the next thing?
Well, what the USAP officers, the president and so on, decided to do was to try to go to a more scientific system, if you will, using one of the algorithms that we all hear about and trying to go off the data and assign people if you will, a more mathematically calculated rating using the same system 303540, but with a mathematical computation behind it.
Was that done in pickleballtournaments.com?
Well, what happened was USAP made the decision to go to the UTPR system. They made another decision. I don't think it was a very good one, but they made a decision. They had an exclusive contract with PT, pickleballtournaments.com, pt.com, and just went to them and gave them, without doing an RFP process or anything formal that I think should have been done, and just gave them the assignment to create a rating system.
Got it.
I've talked to the pt.com people that David Johnson was the main person at PT involved with that, and they unfortunately gave him extremely little direction other than basically give us an algorithm and a rating system.
Right.
And that's how the original UTPR was created.
And there was this transition just a few years ago with a WPR versus the UTPR. What I had heard was that the top players were not liking every sanctioned and non-sanctioned events being calculated. And so the WPR, do I have this right, is all events in pt.com, and the UTPR was just for sanctioned events. And they sort of managed two sets of numbers.
Yeah, I mean, there was sort of a internal tug of war at USAP about what to include and what not to include.
Right.
And the cutoff line between sanctioned and unsanctioned tournaments is one of those areas of disagreement.
Right. With
the thinking being, put yourself in USAP's place. They want every tournament to be sanctioned. They get a fee out of it. That's the benefit they offer to members, things like that. So there was a strong feeling by a number of people at USAP. We want to encourage tournaments to be sanctioned, discourage them from being unsanctioned. And one way to do that is to say that only sanctioned tournaments will be included in the data. The other view then, of course, is, well, we want the more data, the better. The more data we get, the more precise a rating can be. And there's a lot of unsanctioned tournaments, especially if you go to the eastern half of the country. And if we don't include unsanctioned tournaments, we're going to be depriving people, say, in Michigan or Connecticut, from the opportunity to have a data-based rating system. And so it ended up being a compromise there for a while, where unsanctioned tournaments were included, but were factored in at a 60% effective.
Right. And then is the current WPR all events?
That's my.
And UTPR is just sanctioned events? Or still at the percentages?
I'm trying to remember where we are on,
right.
Because you've got for USAP, they actually now have 3 different ratings out there. One of them is the old legacy rating, which is still kind of hanging out there.
Right. And it just has older data in it. Is that what it?
Well, it's set in stone. It doesn't get changed anymore.
Oh, okay.
For example, if I'm playing in some tournaments and I just kick some butt at 4.0, there's no tournament director sending in a recommendation to USAP, hey, move Jim up to 4.5. So the legacy rating is still out there in the background, but it's calcified. It's not changing or being utilized. Yeah. Then you've got the UTPR as originally conceived through PT. Then you've got the new revised UTPR that the USAP committee I was on created, that for whatever reason has not been implemented.
That's not been implemented. But you have the WPR also within Pickleball.
Right. Then you've got WPR, you've got Duper. Right. I think Pickleball Den has a rating system. There's a number of other rating systems out.
Right. So Duper, when did Duper come about? 2-3 years ago?
Duper's been around, I
Oh, it has?
think, for maybe a year or possibly even a little bit more. They've certainly taken off in the last 6 months or more. I mean, you watch a tournament on TV now, and you see the banners on the sideline
Oh, sure.
of advertisers. Duper seems to be always in there, so a lot of credit to them for the effort they've put into the marketing of their system.
And they get fed pickleball tournaments pt.com data, right? As one source. And then I know you can manually enter into Duper, and I guess leagues can submit to Duper, right?
Yeah. I don't have much of an IT background, so a lot of what I've learned about the rating system on that aspect of it, the sort of the IT aspect, is from other people. And I know there's kind of a controversy among the IT people about how you assemble the data, who owns the data. For
Right,
example, if there's a USAP sanctioned tournament and USAP is working through PT.com, and PT.com then has that data from the tournament, whose data is it? Is
right,
it PT's data? Is it USAP's data? Is it public data? And other sports went through this over the years. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but like, for example, when fantasy football started, there was a big controversy about who owned the data. If
yeah,
And it goes back a number of years. It would go back to Joe Montana throwing a touchdown pass to Jerry Rice. Who owns that data? And the NFL took the position that they own that data, and they actually lost in court proceedings. And it was ruled that it's just data is just data. It's like you can't own the fact that the weather forecast is 75 degrees. You don't own that data.
right.
Uh, and so there's a lot of um, even though the data is considered public information, if I collect it and I have it on my website, can you go on my website and do what they call scrape the data and
Yep.
keep it for yourself and use it? And that's still, I guess, a real sort of moral, ethical issue for IT people about how to do it and whether you can do it. And
Just to round out the other ratings systems, it looks like Pickleball Brackets has a rating. I think it's sort of coined the PBR. And I've just set up my first tournament on Pickleball Brackets, and they seem to uh, have a what's called a legacy Pickleball Brackets rating. I think Duper is going to replace it, but
yeah.
there seems to be a rating there. And then it looks like Universal Tennis is proposing to get into a rating.
Mm-hmm.
So we have our hands full with ratings systems. Everyone's juggling to, establish their rating as the rating standards. Um,
Yeah, UTR getting involved is really interesting.
yeah,
The Duper people have a very heavy tennis background, so a lot of what's gone into Duper is from
tennis,
UTR and a tennis background.
right.
So I'm not clear. USTA is backing UTR coming to pickleball, and I'm not sure what they're offering that is new or different
Right,
um,
right.
from anybody else. And
Yeah.
I'm sure how all these folks are all going to make money off of it too. Obviously, they're getting involved because they think they're going to make money off it. And
Yeah, some of it
really,
is having uh, the system to run a tournament and then have a rating system within it. So I don't know whether you make money right off the ratings, but you definitely can make money off of a system, a management system to run leagues and
sure,
tournaments.
but I can run a tournament software and run a tournament without having my own rating. I can grab somebody else's rating. I can grab USAP's rating. I can grab
Sure.
Duper's public information. I don't know if you've done it. I've certainly done it, where you go on Duper's site and you can enter your name or somebody
Yep.
else's name.
Yep.
Boom, up pops a rating. I could do an unsanctioned tournament using Duper ratings and just scrape my ratings off the Duper website. I mean, they want me to do that.
Right. Right. Yeah. Okay. So those are the rating systems. Let's go over a little bit because I've read a lot of your articles or your writings, I would call them. And these were the things that you point out, which is very interesting about how to the factors that go into a rating. The first one you identify was a singles versus doubles versus mixed rating.
Sure.
Right? Having potentially different ratings for different types of play.
Mm-hmm.
You want to talk about that briefly?
Yeah, I mean, more generally, take a slight step back. What people need to understand is an algorithm, a rating system, is just a series of questions and a series of answers, answering different issues. And what you come up with for the technical mathematical algorithm is going to depend on what issues, what questions you ask, and how you resolve those issues. And your example is just one of many questions that you can have and put into it. And so it's, do I have a rating? Do I have a singles rating and a doubles rating? Do I have a doubles rating, or do I have a gender double, male double, and a separate mixed doubles rating? And there's no like most of the questions, there's no quote unquote right answer. It's just how does it feel to you?
Right.
And then the mathematicians, the IT guys, can give some advice on whether that will lead to a quote unquote more accurate system or not.
Right.
But it's mostly a matter of personal preference and feel.
I guess with each of these, why don't we compare, I think, the two dominant players, which is UTPR versus Duper. So UTPR has, I believe, a singles, doubles, and mixed, right?
Correct.
And Duper just has singles and doubles?
That's my understanding, yes. If you look at their website, look yourself up, you'll just see a singles and a doubles rating.
Yeah. Now, the next category, and I have about 6 of these to go through, was age and gender versus ageless and genderless.
Right.
Neither of those two systems have any separate rating for age and gender, but I guess your age and gender could be used in the calculation of your rating.
Well, the current UTPR and the proposed revised UTPR, both are gendered systems, separate male and separate female systems. UTR and Duper are quote unquote universal systems, meaning there's no separation based on age or gender. And that comes from UTR tennis tournaments. If you see a UTR tennis tournament, they have, and again, it'll mostly be singles as opposed to pickleball, which is mostly doubles. But you can play in a UTR tennis tournament, and your first round match, you might play a 17-year-old female. Your second match, you might play a 39-year-old male.
Yeah, that doesn't happen in pickleball.
52-year-old female,
yeah.
Because you're all rated, say, 4.0, and it's a 4.0 tournament, but it's genderless, ageless, with the theory being that you are all 4.0s.
Now, we don't, there's really no different calculation for gender. It's just that the women have a rating and the men have a rating, and the women typically play women and the men typically play men. So there's nothing, when you say UTPR has gender factored in, is there really gender in any of the calculation, or is it?
Not in the calculation, it's just the separation. And so there's no attempt in UTPR to put men and women on the same scale. So there's no claim under UTPR, if you have a man and woman that are both 4.0, there's no claim that they're equal in skill. There's no representation of them being equal in skill. Duper claims to represent that a 4.0 female is the same as a 4.0 male, regardless of age, which is, I mean, we can talk about it further, which is, it's completely wrong.
Claim it, but there's no, you can claim whatever you want to claim, but the data and who you play defines your rating.
Yeah,
right?
there are what, in my opinion, there are 2 major flaws to Duper, and that's one of them.
We'll get into that. Okay. Win-loss versus score of match. Most systems are just whether you've won or lost, right? Do you know of any
Uh,
system that actually uses the score of the match? Does UTR or any system you're aware of?
well, I don't know what USTA has planned for the UTR, if that's what they're going to call it, the UTR for pickleball. My
Oh,
my understanding is the UTR in tennis does take into account score, so that
oh,
if
it does. I didn't know
you
that. I didn't know that.
that's my understanding. Plus, I believe there's other systems out there, other sports like squash, I believe, takes into account score,
Okay,
but there's other ones where it does take into account score. And what my understanding is, for example, you and I are scheduled to play. What
right,
it would do is compare our ratings and calculate an expected score. So the expected score might be you winning 6-4, 6-4. If we
right.
play and you win, but it's 7-5, 7-5, even though you won, I slightly exceeded expectation. And therefore, my rating would go up very slightly and yours would go down very slightly. And so, again, there's no right and wrong to this issue. It's just feel. How does it feel to you or
Oh,
to me or to anybody else? Do you think score should matter?
so are
And
you saying UTPR does not adjust your rating up and down based upon how well you did against what you were predicted to do?
the current UTPR does not take into account score. So if you lose 11-0, 11-0, it's exactly the same as if you lose 11-9, 9-11, 11-9. Now, you tell me if
So
you
then
play
the only thing they're predicting is whether you're going to win or lose.
correct, but they're also not giving you credit for a quote unquote good loss. And I can tell you, having played matches, say, against Glenn Peterson and Scott Moore, if I
Oh, sure.
walked away losing 11-8, 11-8, I feel pretty good about myself.
Right.
But to treat me the same as if I lose 11-0, 11-0, to me, it does not make sense. Now, again, there's differences of opinion on this,
Right.
but the UTPR currently does not take into account score. The UTPR revision that's before the USAP board would take into account score.
Okay.
And so under the revised UTPR, it would predict a score, and you just turn that into, use the math and say it predicts 11-9, 11-9. It's predicting one team's going to win 55% of the points and the other team's going to win 45% of
And
the
if the
points.
result was 11-9, 11-9, neither player's ratings would change?
Correct.
Got it. Yeah.
Correct. It'd just be a push. But if
Right.
it's predicting you win 55% of the points and you win 62% of the points, you would go up and the other team would go down.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Tournament ratings versus club ratings versus like pro ratings. You talk
Very
about
important.
that in some of your discussions.
Yeah. That's, of all the issues, that's probably the number one issue that I take a personal interest in. When I got involved with ratings and kind of became famous or infamous, however you want to put it, on Pickleball Forum for talking about ratings and having some level of expertise, I would have people come up to me at tournaments and make comments, say, "Hey Jim, I read your post. Here's what I think about this, or here's what I think about that, or here's where I disagree with you." A lot of good discussions I've had with people at tournaments. The number one thing that really got to me was the experience of having somebody come up to me and often very emotional about how ratings were harming their enjoyment of pickleball. And the number one way it came up is a club player. And what I mean by a club player is, you're a member at Sun City Grand, or you're a member at Pebble Creek. And at these large communities, they'll have often very structured play where women 50 to 60 years old, 3.5, get to play Thursday at 10 a.m. for a 2-hour block.
Right.
And it's a great thing. It's a marvelous social interaction. People, you live in Michigan, you move to Arizona, you move to Pebble Creek, you sign up for the ladies 3.5.
Yep.
Boom, that's the single greatest thing about pickleball. You've got 50 friends the next day.
Right. And you're having great games because everyone's skilled.
Yeah.
Similar.
you're having great games, but you're meeting people. Then your whole social life comes out of that. You're playing cards on Thursday night with them. You're going out to dinner on Friday night. You got the barbecue. You know exactly what I mean. Everybody knows. But what happened is I'd have people come up to me and literally I'd sometimes in tears saying how their club play had been ruined by the rating system because they've been in the ladies 50 plus 3.5 league forever. All their friends are in the league, but then they happen to play a tournament, get a bad result, and their UTPR dropped to 3.49. And every club has their, what I call kind of their rating Nazi, who, oh, Susie moved down to 3.9. She has to be kicked out of the 3.5 league.
Right.
And all their friends, their whole social life revolved around that. And they're being kicked out.
Did UTPR try to do the 2-digit that changes, is it quarterly?
Yes.
As a attempt to lessen the impact of your rating moving? Was that the
I don't know that it was to lessen the effect of the movement. It was in part, as I understand it, because there's a lag between registering for a tournament and playing in the tournament. Right. And so the problem would be is if you're moving the rating and taking into account that movement on a weekly basis or a daily basis. I'm signing up for a tournament in January that takes place in March. I'm constantly going to have situations where I sign up at 4.0, but I get knocked down to 3.5 in between the two. So it was a compromise between daily movement versus yearly movement.
Okay, so it wasn't to try to help the club. So
no.
Are you advocating a separate club or annual rating?
Well,
that doesn't move as often.
What I always talk about is the different classes of pickleball players, and to me the classes are rec players. They're purely rec. They play out with their family or their friends at the public park. They don't care about ratings. They don't use ratings. They don't play tournaments. They're rec players. We set those aside. Then you've got club players. Again, you Sun City Grand. You play with your friends. Maybe it's a league. Maybe there's a ladder. Club, you're really focused on the club play. May play an occasional tournament, may not, but that's really your focus. Tremendous number of players. For every tournament player, there's 1,000 club players. Huge number. I mean, Pebble Creek's got over 2,000 club players out here, for example. I know Pebble Creek real well because a lot of my friends are there. They've got maybe 50 of them play tournaments. So huge number of club players. Then you've got tournament players that are, they may play at a club, they may not, but they play, some level of tournaments a year, 4 tournaments a year, 8 tournaments a year, 20 tournaments a year. Then you've got the pros.
Right.
And, the pros are this much of pickleball. The tournament players are this much of pickleball. The club players are, this much of pickleball. And so one of the things that I really advocated when I was on the USAP committee is we've got to protect and promote and satisfy the club player. That's where 95% of the people are. We've got to have a rating system that meets their interest, because their interest is not the same as the tournament player, and it's really different from the pro player.
What rating system does that club use?
Well, what clubs were doing is they were adopting a UTPR, which and this is one of the things that's not talked about a lot, but it's incredibly important, is when USAP and PT got together to create the original UTPR, USAP gave PT almost no guidance other than give us a rating system.
Right.
What David Johnson created in PT was a tournament seeding system, not a tournament rating, a tournament seeding system. And we can talk about the difference between a tournament seeding system and a tournament rating system. They then gave a tournament seeding system, and they expressly told USAP, do not use it for club players. Right. And the reason, it's stability is the big reason, stability of the number. Do not use it for clubs. USAP then put out the UTPR without any proviso of what PT had told them. And suddenly clubs were using it because they thought that's the rating system. So I think I'm supposed to use it. But it was never meant for club play, and it's terrible for
And the
club.
clubs couldn't put their club play into the system, right?
Correct. Correct.
So they're using a rating from, yeah, that's crazy.
And the
Maybe that's why
reason
Duper became popular, because anybody can put data into Duper. You don't have to create a tournament to manage your rating.
sure, I mean we can talk about that. I think that's a big flaw to Duper, but that is what Duper did. But the problem with the UTPR is, as a tournament seeding system, it was intentionally created to be very, I don't know, unstable is the right word, but quite variable, move up and down.
Right.
And the reason for that is it was really oriented toward the pros, and the thought being you have a team that maybe is seeded seventh, but they finished second in a tournament, and then maybe they finished third in the next tournament, and they wanted a system to really recognize, oh, that team's hot.
Sure.
So the next tournament, just 3 weeks later, they wanted that seventh seeded team to really move up and be third seeded because they're hot. And so it's a system which created great variability. And so you've often seen, I'm sure, one of the complaints about the UTPR is my rating's bouncing all over the place.
Right.
Well, that's because it's a tournament seeding system, whereas a tournament rating system should be much more stable.
What system?
I've played a lot.
What system are these clubs? You're saying clubs are we don't have too many clubs on the East Coast that I know of.
Mm-hmm.
What system are these clubs using to manage the club and then enter information?
Well, in my experience, what clubs did was, once the UTPR came out, is they just adopted the UTPR. They had done it by legacy. So in my example, say somebody lives back east, they move out here, they move into, say, Pebble Creek, they want to join the club and the ladder. What they used to do was you just play with maybe a couple of guys or women who are on the management committee and play with you a little bit. Oh yeah, you seem like a 3-5. We just throw you in the 3-5 ladder. But then once the UTPR was created, now we've got an official rating system. So go get yourself in a tournament or two and get an official rating, and then we'll throw you into the ladder, the club play that matches your tournament.
A player that's playing in this club for 4 years never plays in a tournament, their rating never changes.
Correct. Their rating would never change. And so it creates a system that is just unresponsive to the needs of the club player. The club player needs a rating that reflects their skill level, not how hot or cold they are at a tournament, their overall skill level. And as you know, there's some people who, when they play a tournament, they just fall to pieces. For whatever reason, you put them in a tournament, they can't perform. And so, but you put them with their friends, recreational play at the club, they're very steady and they can play. So a tournament rating system really doesn't meet the needs of the club player. The club player needs something where, here's my skill level. Oh, you're a 3-5. I mean, we can do this. I used to do this with Jack Thomas when he was president of USAP. We were friends, and we'd sit there at play on the weekend, and we'd watch people play, and we'd go, what do you think that person is? And we'd watch, and we go, oh yeah, I think they're a 4-0. And go, yeah, I think 4-0 too. And I would say 75% of the time we absolutely agree. 25% of the time we might say, well, I'd say maybe low 4-0. You say, well, I'm kind of thinking high 3-5. But it was very easy to tell the skill level of people. And so once somebody's played for a while, pretty much their skill level is their skill level. I know for me, my skill level hasn't really changed in the last 6 years that I've played pickleball. I'm basically the same player. Your skill level really doesn't change much over time once you've played the game some. Now, initially, you're a tennis player to come over. It takes a while to get going. But other than that, like my wife has been playing for 5 years. She's a 3-5. She's a good 3-5. She hasn't changed a whit in 4 years at skill level. She's a little bit better, but most people get a little bit better. So the average skill of a 3.5 does go up over time. But she goes up a little over time. So she just stays right there as a solid 3.5 player.
Okay, so the next topic is in like things to consider for ratings is what set of data should be used? Meaning, should it be the last, let's say, 30 matches or the last year's worth of matches? And can you describe what UTPR currently uses?
UTPR currently uses all the data going back, but it doesn't weight the data in the sense of say I played 20 tournaments this year and you played 2 tournaments. My rating will have, well, and suppose we've never played before this year. My rating has 20 examples to feed into it. Yours has 2.
Right.
You would think mine would be more stable. Mine would be less affected by the next tournament result. But no, they're equally stable or equally unstable. And the example I would use is suppose you take a class at school and the teacher says your grade is going to be based upon 10 quizzes over the course of the year, each quiz counting 1/10. Well, the first quiz you take is going to be 100% of your grade. The second quiz you take is going to be 50% of your grade. The third quiz you take is 33. By the end, when you take the 10th quiz, every quiz is 10% of your grade. Your grade has become much more stable over time because there's more data behind it. One of the problems with the UTPR is it's not more stable if there's more data. So somebody who's played 100 tournaments versus somebody who's played 1 tournament, their rating is equally stable. In other words, it'll move up or down just as much because of the
last
next
result
tournament, which again makes 0 sense to me.
So you have a rating going into a tournament, you play a set of matches, those matches alter your rating.
Correct.
And so your rating is not constantly calculated from the volume of data every time. Your rating
Well,
is just moved
it
from your
is
last match.
it is in the sense of I go into the first tournament. I'm a 4.000. I play match number 1. I get a result. It moves me up to 4.010. I play the next match. It moves me down to 4.050, et cetera,
But
et
each
cetera.
match is moving it. It's not
I
recalculating using all the match data. It's just moving it from.
Right. Yeah, all the match data goes into that current rating, but then you take that current rating and it moves up or down based upon the next match. They don't sit there and say,
Right.
you've got a rating and it's based on 10 matches, and therefore your next match is only going to influence it 10% because we
Right.
already have 10 matches in the system. It doesn't do that.
Right.
So stability, that's stability. And again, it's meant to reflect what PT created, which was a tournament seeding system. So the fact that you might have been hot 6 months ago and smoking people, they
Right.
didn't care about because they're wondering, are you hot or cold today? And we want to seed you correctly today. And that depends on what you've been doing for the last couple of tournaments. So it's really thinking about pros, and we see it seems like how many tournaments a year does Ben Johns play? It seems like the guy plays about 50 tournaments a year. So those pros are constantly playing tournaments, and we want to reflect that Paris Todd just came on the scene and started kicking butt right off the bat. So we want to give her an appropriately high seeding. So it's a very sensitive rating. Is another way to put it. Unstable, or but it's a sensitive rating.
I looked up the UTR and it says it uses the last 30 eligible match scores from the last 12 months. So it is using the data to calculate, it's using a year's worth of data and up to 30 matches to calculate your rating at a given time, right?
Okay. What I don't know is I don't know whether it is weighting all those matches equally,
right,
or it's just saying we're going to cut off your data at 1 year. We're going to cut off your data at 30 matches. And so if I play 29 matches and I've got a 4.00, does my next match count 1/30th of my rating, or does it count 30/30ths?
right. Whereas
That's, I'm not sure.
UTPR is changing, it's altering your current rating by your last match results,
Correct.
and it just
Correct.
keeps altering it.
Keeps
It's
altering
not,
it. And
there's no way to say, okay, take a set of data and calculate it. It is just constantly altering it.
correct. Correct. Your rating, say, is 4.100. It does not matter how much data went into that, whether it was one
Right,
tournament, one match, or 50 tournaments and 50 matches. You're a 4.100, and you will be affected through the algorithm by the next match result, no matter what. It doesn't matter how much data underlies that 4.100. It does take into account all those matches you've played, but it just
right,
creates a number that's equally stable or unstable regardless of how much data went into it.
right, right. Okay. Um, and then how uh, a new player starts their rating and whether that rating should be used in calculations. So I think you might have written that someone that just self-rates themselves, which I think almost all the systems start out with a self-rating, right? And then I thought that was a good point, whether self ratings should be used in a results for a match, right?
Well, one of the bigger complaints that you see, say, on Pickleball Forum about rating system is sandbagging.
Yeah,
And sandbagging is certainly something that I've heard a lot about from a lot of people.
but you can only
Um,
sandbag once, really, or
well, not
early
exactly.
on in your career.
Not exactly. You could actually, I mean, if that was really your intent, and there's intentional sandbagging and there's kind of unintentional sandbagging. Like when I first played a tournament, um, I had no idea, literally no idea of my skill level. My
Right.
first partner and I said, let's just play this tournament. We saw it, and it happened to be an age only event where skill didn't matter. So we didn't have to figure out what we were. We
Right.
signed up, and it turned out we played a couple of 3-0 teams and we did okay. And then we played like a 4-0 team and kind of, had trouble. Then we played a couple of guys that are now friends of mine that were 5-0s, and they just killed us. And I was like,
Right.
God, they were hitting dinks and different shots. Like, I'd never seen it before. It taught me that I had no idea what I was doing.
Right.
But if you play in a first tournament and you have to have a rating and you do get to self rate, if you're just one of those people who so often come over from tennis, it's hard to know exactly what your rating is. And so most of the
I
time, I
have
think
found more people, I
people
think,
pick 3,
rate
5.
themselves too high for their first tournament than too low.
Certainly,
I think
certainly,
both ways can happen.
I've had friends that did it where I
Yeah.
remember well one friend playing his first tournament. He said, "What do you think I should play, 4-5?" And I said, "Don't take this personally, but I said I think you should play 3-5." And he's like, "What?" He said, "I play with you guys. I'm fine." And I said,
Right.
"Tournaments are different.
Yeah.
Tournaments are your first couple of tournaments. You, for whatever reason, almost everybody gets kind of nervous and doesn't play up their skill level." And he said, "Ah, you're crazy. He played 4-5 and he got
Well,
smoked."
that's where
And he came,
the
said,
whole
"Yeah, I need to
thing
play lower."
of ratings and sandbagging, that whole topic is why rating systems get a bad rep, you know, and I think the only way to solve it is, one, to get enough data. You have to have enough data and results, uh, and to have a decent algorithm that is going to work, right? Without the data, you can't do anything, right? And so,
Yes, but pick one. I mean, one of the great things about pickleball is there's always new people joining. There's always more people joining the sport. There's always
right,
people coming over from tennis, and that's a great thing. And we don't want to discourage them from playing tournaments. Everybody's got to play their first tournament sometime.
right,
And So we do have to allow those people to play, and we've got to come up with some system that allows them to play, allows them to enjoy themselves without harming the current players.
That was
and
your point in that article.
Cooper, UTR, etc., do nothing about the sandbagging problem.
Right.
And the revised UTPR, we actually did incorporate what I thought was not a perfect system, but the best system we could come up with for limiting sandbagging. And what we did in the revised UTPR is a recommendation that when you first start playing tournaments, you're a null in the system.
Right.
So you and I decide, we've never played a tournament before, you and I decide to sign up for a tournament, we sign up at 3-5. It turns out, because of our tennis background, we're really good and we just crush everybody. Well, we would be a null in the system. In other words, the results of people playing us simply would not affect the other person's rating.
But
So
how about your rating?
What would happen with us is we have no official algorithm related rating until we play a certain number of matches or a certain number of tournaments. And you can debate how many are needed in order to have a real rating. Is it 5 tournaments? Is it 10 matches? But with the revised UTPR, we put in some limitations that you are a null in the system until you played a certain number of matches. And I believe we set it at 10 matches. So once you have 10 match results, then what the system would do is take those 10 results, see how you did, and remember, score matters. So we'd look at it, and then we would calculate mathematically your rating based upon those 10 match results. So if you played, say, a tournament at 3-5 and you're beating everybody 11-1, 11-0, it would take that into account and give you a much higher rating than if you played 3-5 and you were still winning, but you're winning 11-7, 11-8.
So you would use the data to eventually give that person a rating, but those 10 matches would not affect the active players?
Correct. So there still would be sandbagging in the sense of if somebody is playing way under their true skill level,
or way above, they could be doing, it could screw up things the other way too, right?
I never hear about anybody complaining about sort of reverse sandbagging, like, oh, I played these 2 tennis players, they thought they were 4-5s, but man, we crushed them. You never hear much about that, but you're right, it would skew the ratings of somebody beating up on them. Right. But they would still be a null in the system under the revised UTPR, and it wouldn't screw up anybody's rating. You wouldn't artificially be knocked down or raised up. And then once the new player gets that set number of matches in the system, it would mathematically calculate, and then they would have a quote unquote official rating. And that 3-5 player might get an initial rating of 4.7 if they, even though they played 3-5 tournaments, if the results were such that they were just smoking everybody.
Right. Okay, so let's go on to, could you talk about this USAP committee that was put together to try to improve UTPR? How long, when did that get created? How long did you work? When did you deliver your recommendations? What's the history of that?
I and some other people that were on the committee, Dave Kohler, Tim Dellinger, were people that were quote unquote outsiders that kind of became known as people that had some level of expertise in the rating system, some level of interest in the rating system. So there was advocacy for a revised UTPR for a long time, years before USAP did anything about it. And I don't know how much detail you want on it, but some staff members, not the board, not the officers, some staff members advocated, like, we really need to revise this UTPR. And finally, they got the board to agree to create a committee to work on it, and a committee consisting of some USAP staff people and then some quote unquote outsiders. And several of us got asked to be on the committee, and I was frankly skeptical that it was a true effort to do anything. I'm sure you've seen, if you read my post, I'm pretty critical of the USAP board, and it's to me lack of responsiveness to member needs and member desires. It's a membership organization, which seems to
they're
me
collecting good money.
Ignore the members. never made any sense to me. So I was pretty skeptical that it was going to be a true effort. And I was I have some friends of USAP staff members, and they convinced me to give it a try. But I said, if it's not a real effort, I'm not going to agree to do it.
How long did you
And
work on it?
I'd have to go back and look at the exact dates. It's been some good number of months since we submitted our recommendation. I mean, it's been probably at least 6 months since we submitted our recommendation.
Oh.
And I would say we worked on it for a good 6 months.
Are those public? Are the recommendations were they ever made public?
I do not believe that USAP ever made them public. I mean, I've got them all. I haven't signed any NDA. I would never have agreed to sign any NDA. So,
Besides,
I know what they are. The other people on the committee know what they are.
Does the USAP actually have a system that is calculating the ratings, or are they just getting data from PT.com and holding a single rating per player? Like, do they actually have a computer system that is managing the ratings?
Not to my understanding at all. No.
Right. So
that was again the problem that we referred to earlier about who owns the data. There was a constant back and forth between USAP and PT about who owned the data, and I think part of that is the reason for the creation of that WPR and so on of PT trying to, at least sort of separate themselves from USAP in case USAP went elsewhere for their rating system.
Yeah, it's definitely complicated. Okay, so it looks like Duper is in bed now with PPA and PT.com and pickleballtournaments.com, pickleball brackets. It looks like that is where that whole group, I don't know what APP is planning. I guess they're just supporting UTPR, right? But
APP is associated with USAP. USAP, I think, is dithering about which way they're going to go. I'm very concerned that USAP they've got kind of a habit of going the path of least resistance. And I'm concerned that they'll just adopt Duper, saying, oh, that's the easiest thing to do, rather than using the revised UTPR, which cures the very, very serious faults that Duper has.
Right. What I'm trying to figure out is if USAP actually doesn't have a system to calculate the rating, and they're relying on PT.com for.
Well, they don't need to. I mean, as I understand it from the people that I've talked to extensively on the issue that know the IT stuff, unlike me, they say it's very easy. All USAP has to do is pick a vendor. They can put out an RFP, as they should have done on every other issue.
Right.
Put out an RFP and get some bids in. People will pay them to be the holder and calculator of the UTPR. This is something where USAP
currently
can make money.
But they currently don't have a system to calculate.
For whatever reason, they haven't done it. But all they have to do is put it out for bid. They'll get a lot of bids. I know a lot of people that would be very interested in being the vendor on the rating system. That vendor can then grab data that currently exists, create a rating for everybody. They can recalculate it under the revised UTPR, or they can say, we're just going to use data going forward into a revised UTPR, and boom, we're off and running with, in my obviously biased opinion, the best rating system by far, the revised UTPR.
Right. Here's the problem. The data is in PT.com, and it's all going to go over to brackets, right? And and will that data be available?
The data is not just at PT.com. USAP has access to the data.
No, all future data is really going to brackets.
Right.
Right.
It's all accessible, though. This is my understanding. It's all accessible.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know whether it's accessible.
No, that's again that gets into IT issues and these issues about scraping data and so on. My understanding is you could have a new company, pickleballratings.com or whatever you want to call it. That vendor could be the holder of the UTPR revised version, and would have access to any and all data that they need in order to create the rating for you, me, and every other USAP member. No problem.
It looks like Duper. It looks like the Duper code, or the algorithm, or the system is going to be managing the rating for brackets and PPA, right?
Well, my understanding is that whole thing is merged. Pickleball
Correct.
brackets,
One big
PT.com, it's
right.
all merging, and
that's where the data is going to be. And
Pickleball brackets, as I understand it, was very good, very well done. I've talked to Jason before. He seems to really know what he's doing. A lot of compliments about that system. And my understanding is PT basically bought it and is going, PT is the whale and pickleball brackets is the little fish being eaten, but it's the little fish's system that's going to become the system of PT, is
right.
to my understanding.
Right.
I mean, we'll see what actually happens. But
I just set up my first tournament in brackets, and it's a very nice system. It's very modern compared to PT.
Yeah, I've never heard anything bad about pickleball brackets, whereas PT gets a lot of complaints, and the IT people tell me their system is very backward.
Okay, so let's talk about Duper.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how it works? Do you know its algorithm? Do you know?
Yeah, when we were doing our committee, one of the things we did was to meet with different people, Zoom conference calls. So we did them with Jason and pickleball brackets. We did it several with Duper trying to convince our committee to just adopt Duper rather than a revised UTPR. Right. And so we spent quite a bit of time with Duper understanding where they were coming from, what was going into their algorithm, what was good about it, what wasn't so good about it. And we made a decision as a committee that the Duper system was seriously defective on a couple of points. And that
was it different than UTPR? What are some of the big differences?
The two key differences, in my opinion, that are bad. And again, different people can have different opinions.
Sure.
The two things, though, that our committee saw as serious faults is, number one, that it allows the input of recreational games, non-tournament games, non-ref games.
Right.
And where sandbagging is perceived to be a huge issue. And I say it that way because I think it's perceived to be a bigger issue than it is.
Yes.
But even if it's a small issue, it's a real irritant to a lot of pickleball players. And so anything that can be done to come up with a system that'll be perceived to be very fair and eliminate sandbagging, I think was really important. If you allow rec play, my understanding of Duper is I can go out, sign up to Duper with 3 friends, and I've got plenty of pickleball friends that never play a tournament, could care less about their rating. Yeah. And I could go to them and say, hey, let's just play rec. Claim we play rec games. I want to drive my rating down so I can play 4-0 at nationals. Right. And we'll just keep reporting scores where you guys kick my butt, and it'll drive my rating down. What Duper says is,
happen too much, but
people say that. You're respectfully, you're extremely wrong.
Too honest.
You're extremely wrong. There are people who if you can sandbag a system, they are absolutely going to do it. Absolutely going to do it. Right. And even if it happens once, that's one too many times. If you have somebody win a 4-0 gold medal at nationals that doesn't belong in 4-0 and did it through gaming the system, that's one time too many. Right. And if you can protect it, and you can protect it, it's not difficult. This isn't difficult. All Duper would have to do is say rec games don't count. That's hardly a land.
Yeah, I don't know why earth-shattering decision. I could see league, like even smaller league, like I generally like the idea of getting more data than just tournaments, right? So when there's round robin leagues, little things, I guess they're tournaments, but more data the better, as long as it's reasonably managed data.
That's a reasonable opinion. That is a reasonable opinion. I disagree with it. My opinion has always been more data is better, but more bad data is not better. And what I want to emphasize, I would rather have my rating based on 5 good points of input than 50 bad points of input. And so what I advocated actually is way to the other side. I didn't win this with our USAP committee, but I didn't win this particular argument. But I wanted the data to only be a tournament result with a referee.
Oh,
had to have a referee, and it had to be in your category. So if I'm a 60 plus 5-0, it doesn't count unless I play 60 plus 5-0. If I get in one of those tournaments where they mix us together, and I end up playing a 55-4-5 or a 55-5-0, that match doesn't count for my data. So my rating system would be based certainly on lesser data, a lesser amount of data, but it would be pure data. It would be true data. To me, there's a big difference between a tournament match, a club match, a rec match, and a refereed match, a non-refereed match. They just feel different.
sure.
And we're talking about a universal tournament rating. So I want a tournament rating based on tournament data. That's my personal opinion. I do think that there, and again, I understand that back east there's a lot of times where there's non-ref tournaments and so on. So how much data are you going to be able to get if it's only a ref match? I understand that. But to cross this line into rec play,
Right.
you'll never
100% with you.
that makes any.
But I think there's
no
a nice
sense.
middle. I think there's a nice middle ground.
There is a middle ground, certainly.
Like one
there,
idea.
but
What about having only tournament directors can submit data, right? Or people that run leagues, tournaments, whatever. They're the only ones that can submit the data, and they have to go through some basic training to make sure that the data they're submitting is somewhat, clean.
Mhm.
So that, and then that's the volume of data. You can decide to use it or rate it or weight it differently. But
Yeah,
try
but
to.
I just think there's a clear, bright line between rec play and everything else, and we can
Sure,
debate
rec
club
play
play,
is- rec play
we
is
can
great.
debate league play and so on.
Right.
League play is
So
certainly
that's the
booming.
first issue with Duper. What's your next
The
issue?
second issue is this whole issue about a universal rating versus a gendered rating, and we all have to start with a basic agreement that men and women are different. 55-year-olds are different from 25-year-olds. If we can't agree on that, we can't make a whole lot of progress. And to me, that anybody that denies that there's a difference based on age or gender,
Yeah,
you just
but I don't see that as an issue because I'm not playing.
it's a huge issue, and here's why. And the Duper people admit this. If you have a universal rating, i.e., a rating that doesn't take into account age or gender, so that with a theory being that a 3-5 is a 3-5 is a 3-5 is a 3-5.
Right.
The only way that works is you have to have data that matches it, i.e., data that comes from people of different genders and ages playing against each other all the time, as does happen in UTR. It doesn't happen in pickleball.
Understood. So if it doesn't happen, then it doesn't. But it doesn't matter. I mean, it does matter that.
It absolutely.
If a let's do singles to make it easy. If hypothetically a woman wanted to play a man in singles, which just doesn't happen very much, then
if at all.
Yeah. So why is it an issue if the woman's 3-5 is a little not 3-5, but the man's 3-5 is a 3-5?
Correct, and I agree with that. The revised UTPR is not a universal system. It has women 4-0s and men 4-0s with no representation that a woman 4-0 is equal to a male 4.0.
Yeah, I don't know why Duper even represents that.
I can tell you. It comes from tennis. Tennis has gone much more to the UTR, the genderless, ageless events, the idea that everybody is on the same system. So if you look at the UTR ratings, you'll see that at the pro level, take for example, that Naomi Osaka or Serena Williams is about a 12.0 or a 12.5, I think, whereas Rafael Nadal and Federer are like 16.0s. And so they have adjusted for gender. There's a wide disparity between male ratings and female ratings. There's a wide disparity based on age. You don't see that in in pickleball. For example, if you look at Duper claims to take into account, but if you look, take my rating. I'm 62, and I think I'm rated in Duper 4.90. If I play a 4.90 25-year-old, I'm gonna get beat. I'm probably gonna get beat badly because
Age I can
62-year-old is not the
understand.
same as a 25-year-old. But equally, if you look at women who are rated 4.9 and I play them, I'm going to smoke them because the rating system does
Where do you
not.
play them? I have not seen a tournament where.
Exactly.
Right.
That's part of the problem is Duper admits that in order to accurately invoke a universal system, you must have data that comes from universal tournaments. And Duper admitted to us when we met with them that they believe pickleball, remember, they all come from a tennis background.
Right.
They want and believe that pickleball is going to go to a tennis-oriented system of genderless, ageless events. And when we met with them, we said, wait a minute, we're pickleball players. We don't see any desire for that. And I talked to a lot of people about this. I talked to my wife and all her friends, and I say, because I constantly do that, because I want a perspective of people who are different from me. So my wife, being a little bit younger than me and being female and being about a 3'5", I get a completely different perspective. And I talked to all her friends, and they left. They have no interest in playing tournaments against men. None.
Right.
Regardless of whether they're at the same level or not. They're fine playing mixed doubles, but they have no interest in a system that's universal where a 25-year-old man is rated a 3.5, and so they play a tournament and that's who they play. And the reason for that is again the social aspect of pickleball. What they get out of a tournament is not just the fun of playing in the tournament. They have the fun of meeting new people who are women of a similar age, and they make friends. They make all kinds of friends through that tournament content.
So
you don't want to play a 25-year-old man. They're not making friends with him.
Right. So your point is simply that Duper is trying to represent it as genderless.
Yeah, they're trying to change the sport. They're trying to change the sport, and I'm adamantly against the changes that they advocate.
Right.
Through their system. That's why I think it's terrible that PPA adopt. I doubt that PPA ever had a discussion with Duper about what their system means, where it comes from, what it represents, what they're trying to do. I'll bet you PPA never knew any of this. Well, I don't know that for sure, but I bet a lot of money on it.
Is your issue that in a mixed match, the woman's rating is not adding up the men's and women's ratings is not going to work?
Well, you can do it because again, when I play mixed doubles and I play with women friends of mine that are at my rating, we play mixed doubles together and it works just fine, even though I am quite a bit better than they are. Just as Ben Johns playing with ALW, Ben Johns is a significantly better player, but he can play with her and match up against Riley and Carolyn Parentow, and the matches work fine. What the problem that Duper has is Duper is representing that a 5.0 or a 4.5 is a 5.0 regardless of their age, regardless of their gender. And it's just false. If you look at the ratings, and we can start most easily with pros. If you look at the rating system, players like Dave Weinbach, Dane Gingrich are rated about the same as a number of the women pros, even though if Dane and Dave played the women pros, they would beat them, and they beat them very badly. Their system is simply not accurate.
Got it. Right. It's the representation of it.
Right. And there'd be nothing wrong if they said,
I wonder how UTPR calculates their algorithm must take into account and weight. They're playing against, so they have data of the woman playing against the man. So
Well, that's what Duper believes the sport. They told us that that's
yeah,
believed.
Duper's never going to have that data.
No, they don't have that data, correct?
Right.
And they admitted that their algorithm is not going to be successful because it doesn't have the necessary underlying data of me and a male partner playing two women, or me and a female partner playing two men, things like that, where you're constantly going to have the UTR style match. Right. You need, they told us that they need that data in order to refine their system.
Okay, we
they
only have 5 more minutes left.
That data.
Sure. Any other major issues with Duper that you see?
No, those are the two big. There's a lot of. I don't mean to just bang on Duper. There are a lot of good things about Duper. Sure. I think the people are intelligent.
They don't have they don't have a mixed rating, right? They just have the singles.
They just have a doubles rating, and that again is a matter of opinion. I advocated for just a doubles rating myself. Oh, okay. The other people on our USAP committee wanted a separate gender doubles and mixed doubles rating, feeling like the two events are different. And I agree that they're different. To me, they weren't different enough to justify the need for a separate rating. Like, for example, I'm rated above 5.0 in mixed, and I'm rated just below 5.0 in men's. To me, that doesn't make any sense that I would sign up for a tournament and play 5.0 mixed, 4.5 men's. To me, that doesn't make sense.
I see. Yeah. Okay. Hey, Jim, I really appreciate your time. Sure. It was very useful. I think hopefully the viewers are going to learn something from it all.
It's all fun stuff, and tell everybody, put up your opinions on Facebook and let's debate it. But it sure would be nice to get USAP to put out the revised UTPR. Obviously, again, I'm biased because I had a big hand in creating it, but I think we really went over the issues. We had a large committee of different people with different thoughts, just as you and I have different thoughts.
Yeah.
We put a lot of work into it and created what I thought was a very, very effective rating system that addressed these different problems that we've talked about. To not use it is a disservice to the members. It's a disservice to the game. It's a disservice to the sport.
It might be nice to somehow release the recommendations, because I have not seen them anywhere. So,
well, I'm willing
to ask you to do it without you.
No, if you really want to know, the honest answer is I am willing to do it. And I've talked to different people who've contacted me about doing it, but I only want to do it if I know somebody's really serious. Duper. The number one thing that Duper does is market, and they've done a great job about marketing.
Oh, yeah.
So if somebody else is going to do it, I want to know that they're actually going to market this system. And
they're still they weren't purchased. Duper was not purchased by PT.
No, I don't know. Not that I know of.
Right. I think they're just decided to team up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much, Jim. Talk to you soon.
Sounds good. See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And if you want to support my channel, check out my shirts, hats, shorts, and sport towels available online at Etsy. Another way you can support my channel is to use the Amazon product links I have in the description of the video. There's no cost to you or added cost, or you can go to my Amazon storefront and select a product. And check out my Pickleball Venues Google map. There's a link in the description. Hey, thanks for watching. If you like this video, all I ask is that you please subscribe by clicking on the top left and share this video with your friends. If you want to see some other pickleball videos, they're here in the center. My other YouTube channel, Tesla Life, is on the bottom left. Check it out. My Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter accounts are listed on the right. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.